Perrysburg and across the river to Maumee. And they said in Toledo they would have some quinine, but they have none. So my horse has taken me here along the 10-Mile Creek, and I find that I should go to Maumee before nightfall to see perhaps if Dr. Conant might have some quinine there. And now what has happened, the horse is a bit lame. He has thrown a shoe. So I am waiting for the blacksmith to change the shoe. So I thought perhaps I would speak to you for a few moments. I do not mean to interrupt your meeting here, but I have come from Germany in 1843, and I arrived in Albany, and I come with my sons, Gottfried, Gustavus, and Frederick, and I leave Germany because there in Württemberg, where I am from, there's an evil ruler, a count, who has said to me that he would take me into the army to make me a soldier, to shoot people. And what I say to my wife, Louisa, that what I am is not a soldier, I'm a physician. So I make my decision. I come with the three sons, Godfrey, Gustavus, and Frederick, and I leave my eldest son, Ernst, there in charge of the family, Louisa, and the daughters, Caroline, Louise, Marguerite, and Wilhelmina. How many children is that? Let me see. Godfrey, Gustavus, Frederick, Ernst, Caroline, Louise, Marguerite, Wilhelmina. I believe that is 7 if I have counted right. So I remained for 1 year in Albany, and there 1 year later my wife Louisa arrives with my daughters and my son, and we are quite happy to see one another. And I say, Louisa, are you well? And she says, yes. And the daughters, they are all well and everyone is fit. But she says, now, Frederick, I have one question of you. What do you suppose that question might be? Where are we going to live? That is a good question, do you think? And so I say to my wife, we are going now to live in a swamp. She says, a swamp? You bring me halfway around the world to tell me this? But have you seen here the tall trees, some 140 feet tall from the base of the ground upward? It reminds me a bit of the Schwarzwald in Germany that we have left, the Black Forest. So then we travel on the Erie Canal. We go from Albany to Buffalo in these canal boats. Who here has ridden on these boats? Anyone here ridden on the canal? Yes. Do you know what I have learned riding on these boats? You must ride on top of the boat. Do you know why? There are 2 mules that they keep inside the boat in the forward cabin, and the smell is more. No bridge might come along and knock you off the boat. If you're not a good swimmer, it could be bad for you. So, as we are traveling there on the Erie Canal from Albany to Buffalo, my wife Louisa begins to converse with the captain of the boat, and he says, dear woman, where are you going to live? My wife says, my husband is taking me to the swamp in northwest Ohio. And he looks at her and he says, do you know, in the swamp there they have mosquitoes as large as birds. As large as birds. And she says, no, I did not know this. There's a story of a man who is staying at the edge of the swamp at nightfall. And he begins to make his fire to cook his supper. And suddenly he hears a sound. Can you make this sound? Louder. Louder. Yes. And suddenly this man is enveloped with a mosquito, so he grabs a pot and places it on his head, and so many drill through with their bills. They are so large, they carry the pot away. And he was last seen running west, never to return to the swamp. My dear wife Louisa, she comes back into the cabin and she says, Frederick, where are you taking me? And I say, what this man has told you is what we call a tall tale, so fear not. So we go from Albany to Buffalo, and then Buffalo to Cleveland. And at Cleveland we consigned 2 wagons for my medical instruments, and some chests of drawers and some linens that Louisa has brought from the family. And we begin to travel overland through Oberlin, and then we come to Lower Sandusky on the Sandusky River. We cross there. And we come up a long hill, and ahead of us, from horizon to horizon, is the swamp. And there's one road which travels directly through the swamp, 33 miles long, direct through the swamp, and tall trees on either side and mud everywhere. And you know, we proceed down the swamp road, and we can only make 1/4 mile before we are then stuck in the mud. And the wheels of the wagon begin to fill with mud, and they look like great wheels of cheese. And we must pull off into an inn, and there we spent the night. And I come out in the morning and I clean the mud from the wheels of these wagons, and then we proceed down the swamp road, and we can only make 1/4 mile before we are again stopped. Do you know what I think? There are innkeepers along the swamp road who take the small streams and they divert them into the road. Then you, as an unsuspecting pioneer traveler, would become stuck, and they would charge you for a fee to be removed from the swamp. Are any of you here innkeepers? If you are, perhaps we should discuss this when I depart. So, there's a story perhaps you have heard of a traveler on the swamp road. I've been told it is the worst road in the country. And what the traveler is rides along the road, and he perhaps looks up at the trees and he sees the birds there, and he listens to the sound of the forest. And there are these magnificent trees there, but there's mud everywhere along the road. And as he travels along, the horse is proceeding, and he looks ahead of him and he sees a hat in the middle of the trail. So he stops the horse and he dismounts from the horse, and he begins to step across in the mud. When he reaches down slowly to pick up the hat, and do you know what he has found under the hat? What? A head. There's a head under the hat. And the head turns up to him and says, "Kind sir, pass me a rope, for I'm sitting here in the mud upon a fine horse." That is also a tall tale. So we proceed onward, and we come to the middle of the swamp, there to a place called the Carrying River, where you would carry your boat more than you would ride in it. It is also called the Portage River. There at Woodville we come across, and there's a dry goods store in the middle, and a man named Powers looks at me, and I believe he is an Englishman, and he looks at me and begins to speak perfect German. I say, "Wie geht's?" And he says, "Wie geht's mit Ihnen?" And we are speaking back and forth German. And his name, Powers, he is quite a good man. He tells me, "This is where you should stay here in Woodville." So there, right across from his store on the side street there near the Portage River, is where I have my office. And Louisa has set up there to see patients during the day. And each spring and fall, what I do is to make a circuit ride around the swamp, perhaps 2 weeks in length, to see my patients. And I go to each door and to each family. And many times when I knock on the door, there are those that are taking the shakes. They have had ague. Who here has had ague? Who knows? Do you know ague? Yes. Yes. For those of you who do not know, it begins first. You know that something is wrong, and suddenly you have this terrible Kopfschmerz or headache, and you are out of your head with the headache, and then comes the shakes, and you shake so much that you must go up to a large tree and hold on so that you do not fall down. And then comes the chills as the fever begins to break, and this repeats perhaps 2, 3, or in 4 days, and you are quite sick. So only one of you has had ague, perhaps the others have been taking quinine. Where have you gotten your quinine from? Perhaps I should speak to you. So, now do you know what causes the ague? Perhaps many diseases here in the swamp come from this. Yesterday afternoon, have you seen when I crossed the Maumee River and I come up toward Toledo? It is fog everywhere. You may think it is fog, and that is true. However, there are vapors which rise from the swamp. These are called miasma vapors. And when you breathe miasma into your body, all sorts of maladies might befall you. And one of them is ague. And perhaps sometimes you get, there are many people here in the swamp who are constantly going like this with their noses. They have what is called the nasal catarrh, yes? catarrh of the nose. And so what I would do is to take a pan of hot water and impart some camphorated oil inside and put a towel over your head and have you breathe deeply of this camphorated oil to ward off these catarrhs that come to you. So now many times when I go see my patients, they say to me, Dr. Jaeger, they are all the time tired. Yes. Who is tired here today? Is there anyone here who's tired? Please, put up your hands if you are tired. I would like to examine you, perhaps. No one is tired? Someone here. One here. This one is tired. I will just be a moment. Let me here looking into my bag. And what I must find here is something quite important. Do you know? At my age, what I must have are spectacles, yes, to see. So now what you must do here, let me see, you are tired, yes? So here, look with the, let me see your eyes and put your head up a bit and look down now. Yes, you are tired. Someone else was tired here. Who raised their hand? Did I see? Yeah, there are some physicians who employ leeches for this purpose, but out here, in the swamp we have not leeches, so I must use a razor. So I look for a good vein on your arm and I open the vein and then allow you to breathe. Did you say you were? And no one else is tired. It seems when the treatment is suggested, the cure comes quickly. So I can see from these eyes that I have examined here that you have perhaps given me a tall tale, and you are not quite full of ill humors. So now, as I said, some employ leeches for this purpose, but my patients prefer the razor. They do not like it, but it is quick. So now, if you are perhaps quite upset and a bit anxious all the time, I might have something for you, which is laudanum. Do you know laudanum? Laudanum is opium and alcohol mixed together. And I would give you a bit of laudanum and then come and perhaps return in a day or two and see how you are feeling. There was one occasion when my friend George Powers, who said to me his favorite horse is quite sick, so he has asked me to come and treat the horse. So I go across with my bag into his dry goods store and past all the goods, past the summer kitchen, and there in the stable, in the back of the stable, is George's horse laying on his side. And you know that is not a good thing for a horse to be laying down and not responsive. So what I do is to take 3 dosages of laudanum, and I place it in the horse's mouth, and I begin to stroke his throat. And the horse begins to shudder and shake and pushes up on his hoofs. And you know that horse is still serving his master. He is now standing and serving. However, I must return once a week to give him a bit of laudanum. I do not know. So, we also have cholera. Cholera is here, and we are quite fearful of this. It arrives seemingly with strangers, so you must be quite, and I am sorry I'm a stranger to you, but I feel quite well. But cholera is a terrible disease. In the morning, the whole family might have cholera. And by nightfall, they are all gone, all dead, from vomiting and diarrhea. So, we do not know what causes this, but it is best to keep away from strangers. Yes. There are other diseases which we have here in the swamp. Yes, many times the small scratches on the skin, they become blistered and infected. And so what I must do is to go and to lance them and then perhaps return again. And after I do that, what I do is to make a plaster and wrap it with a plaster. And I must return every day for several days to change the dressings. And somehow these abscesses continue to cause problems here. And there is constant infection, yes. So does anyone have any questions of the doctor today? You are all quite well, I see, and one here has been taking his quinine. No questions of the doctor today? You are